Earmac. I'm joined from Earmac today by Nick, our online content director, who is going to be monitoring the chat for your questions and who's going to be making sure that the stream runs smoothly. I am also joined by our program director, Deborah, who is going to be doing some housekeeping announcements for us, as well as our 4 fantastic panelists who I will introduce you all to shortly. So Deborah, you want to take away the housekeeping?
Sure. I'm Deborah Henderson, and I'm a VP of Programming for Earmac. And you probably know our splash page now, if you're a repeat attendee. And I wanted to do a bit of housekeeping now. We're having a course called Cracking the DM Box. It is a 3-day course being offered by Earmac, and I will be teaching it. And it is a preparation course for the CDMP Data Management Fundamentals exam, or just because you have the DM box on your shelf and it's too big and too difficult to get into, and you really haven't been able to digest it or get it under your belt. So a 3-day course. The course will run January 26th to the 28th. And please visit our website, look under events, and you can send any questions to Eden through that communications email. That's our housekeeping coming up. In next month, we will also be having a webinar session, and look forward to communications on that one. It'll be more technical. We have a sponsor for Earmac, and it's Infoset. Infoset is passionate about helping small and medium-sized businesses like yours learn to extract value from data, and together we free up people to do high-value work that benefits your company and gives your team greater job satisfaction. So take a look at infoset.ca. Local to here in Canada, but of course, as always, Earmac pulls its speakers and its sponsors and these wonderful people from around the world to help us out with our programming. So over to you, Eden.
Apologies, I am having trouble finding the Zoom interface, but I am here now and I found it. So welcome everyone to the Earmac Information Professionals panel. This is the first time we've tried hosting a panel, so we may go through some growing pains, but I think we've got things all figured out. The format for this panel is going to be as informal. It is going to be formatted, but as informally as possible. We've got 4 panelists here on Zoom with us. We're streaming to YouTube as always. I'm going to be walking them through doing introductions, and then we have some questions prepared, but we're also going to be taking your questions from the audience, and we're encouraging the panelists as well if they have questions for each other. So I'm going to do a brief introduction to each of our panelists. Then I'm going to pass it off to them to tell you a little bit about themselves. So we have joining us Robert Snoyer, Managing Partner at Copperstone Connect, who's going to talk to us a bit about recruiting and what people are looking for in the industry. We've got Martin Sykora, Senior Architect at Telus, who is an old hand and who's going to be telling us all about the evolution of the industry during his time in it. We have Dr. Francine Adams, who's an adjunct professor at Southern New Hampshire University, who's going to be telling us all about the education that is going on in the data and information industries and what is being taught these days, as well as hopefully some of her research. And then we have Mel Gregorio, Director of Enterprise Information Governance at OLG, who is a relative newcomer to the data and information industry and who's going to be telling us about his experience moving into that space. So I'm going to stop my share. So you can see the fantastic faces of each of our panelists. I was muted for a moment, my apologies. And I thought I would ask you each to introduce yourself in the order that I just introduced you. So Rob, do you want to take us away and tell us a bit about what you do right now?
Sure. So Rob Snoyer, I'm a managing partner at Copperstone Connect. We do data and analytics staffing, so that's contract and perm. And we've been doing that for about 11 years with our business. Prior to that, my partners and I, we had a, back then it was called business intelligence and data warehousing. We had a consulting company that grew to about 50 people. We exited that in 2006, stayed around with our new company for about 4 years, and then we began Copperstone Connect, and we kind of left the consulting world and went into staffing and recruiting, but stayed within the same realm, which is data, analytics, business intelligence.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. But before we do that, Martin, why don't you tell us a bit about what you do right now?
Sure. So I'm a senior architect at Telus. I work for the data strategy and enablement team, and I'm responsible for platform architecture technology. And I'm focused primarily on integration and process automation for the metadata and data quality programs.
Awesome. These all sound really interesting. It's gonna be hard to get through all the questions I have lined up. That's why I only sent you a handful. So Francine, why don't you tell us a bit about what you're doing currently?
Thank you. I am I have my own corporation, Fame Futures Millennium Corp, where I'm principal consultant. And as one of my contracts, I do serve at Southern New Hampshire University as an adjunct professor. And I teach them courses, data and information management and data analytics. I've also served as subject matter expert in both disciplines for curriculum development. And I pretty much have a great deal of passion for the data and information arena.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing more about how it sounds like you get industry experience and educating experience,
Yeah.
which is a great mix, especially for people to learn from and for you to teach. So finally, Mel, last but not least, why don't you tell us a bit about what you're currently working on or doing?
Thanks, Eden. Hi, everyone. I'm Mel Gregorio. I'm Director for Information Governance here at the Ontario Lottery Gaming. So about 2 years into my role, we've spent quite a bit of time injecting information governance, information management requirements into some of our existing OLG process, like our system delivery processes, our RFX processes, to kind of make sure that none of these governance or information management requirements are missed by projects. Our first year was really around establishing our information governance charters, our various domain teams, data owners, and data stewards. As we moved into our second year, we've now got approval to develop our data management strategy, which was just signed off early this calendar year. And now moving on to the implementation of our data management program and the various initiatives within that.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations on getting the strategy signed off. That must have been a ton of work.
It was.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to hear all about it. Now, to start with, I thought I would throw you all some general questions. And Rob, I thought we'd start with you because I think this might inspire a lot of conversation. If you could, as in your experience as a recruiter, if you could tell us a bit, what are the most sought after roles and skills in the data analytics and information professions, just broadly speaking?
Of course. So right now, I'd say anything cloud. That's big out there. Typically, that breaks down into Azure as kind of the leader. AWS is second, and GCP is third, but anything cloud people are clamoring for. Following on that, anything Azure. So Microsoft has been a leader in the business intelligence and the data and analytics space for quite some time. If you look at I think the 2020 Gartner quadrant, they were in the upper right-hand corner, and there was no one that was really close to them. Tableau was kind of a distant second, and then there was a whole bunch of people that were all third, or collected in third, fourth, and etc. So anything around Azure, so data factory, data lake, analysis services, Power BI, Azure SQL Server. So those are kind of the ones we're seeing a lot of. Getting more into specifics and roles, we're seeing a lot of on-prem to cloud migrations. Companies are all moving off of on-prem, and they're going either to a hybrid or to a full cloud platform. So that's very popular. I mean, that won't last forever, because eventually we'll all migrate and it'll be over with. But for the interim, we're seeing a lot of migration projects. Data engineering has become extremely hot. Very, very hard to find. We'll talk about that later, but very hard to find data engineers. On the data visualization side, Tableau is doing great. So we're seeing a lot of Tableau. Java as a programming language is quite popular, not just as a programming language itself, but also because it's the core to other technologies. So if you're using Talent, they want someone who's strong in Java. So those are the ones I'm kind of seeing at the forefront right now.
Okay, that's really interesting. I imagine that that'll probably match up with a lot of trends that everyone else here has seen. I'm particularly interested in, Francine, if you know, what are students most interested in learning about? And does it kind of match up, or are they spotting a new direction that's maybe going to be the big thing after this?
That's really a great question, because I teach the foundation course in data and information management. And I get a spectrum of students, from novices that are entering college to adult students returning to college, or in search of employment, or students who are already employed in the field and they want to advance to a more current technology. What I find is that they really want to master the learning objectives, either to get a job or to take something back to their place of employment, so that they can demonstrate that they've grown and they can contribute. Also, because some of their employers are paying for their courses as well. And if they're not a technical student, then they want to better comprehend what the technical people are doing at their place of employment.
That's a good point, right? These skills are all focused on the highly technical, but there is also the non-technical aspect, the policy, the strategy, the architecture, which I think does lead us to Martin and Mel. I think I'll get to you too with this one at a time, but I think it'll be on the same vein. Although I think Martin, will start with you, because I also have so the additional question beyond, what you're seeing in terms of the move to cloud, and then what people are planning for. I'm also very curious about what it was like to move into this very cloud focused space, because you were there before everybody started moving to the cloud, started wanting to migrate things. So I'm wondering what that transition was like, as well as, Francine has spoken about her students who are also employed and who are sponsored by their employers to go get this new education. And I'm wondering what the process is like from your perspective of people getting these skills.
Yeah, no, great questions. So we've been trying to use more diligently a service called GTLP, which I can't remember what it stands for off the top of my head, but it's basically a student onboarding mechanism. They join Telus and they perform several rotations with different faculties, with different groups within the company, and they choose their rotation, right? They align themselves behind the different sectors that they want to participate in, whether that's software engineering or data engineering or data sciences, or ours, data governance. And this we find highly effective because they're onboarded. They choose their discipline, if you will. They choose their specialization, and after 2 or 3 rotations, they're actually very useful students, and they're very useful from a retention perspective, right? They've learned their studies, if you will, and then they've done their practicum, right? It's almost like a co-op program, an applied program. We found that highly effective, and we're trying to onboard more students using the GTLP. In terms of our transition, I mean, we're pretty blessed and fortunate. We've signed a 10-year partnership with Google, and that is our transition partner, our transition plan. We started on premise, everything was on premise, and we have multiple data centers. So it's been a big transition from that perspective. And it's a lot from governance. It's just the ownership and operation it's a completely different mindset, because it's infrastructure as a service, software as a service. We didn't have that before. It was basically, all hardwired into someone's PCs or wherever it landed. And obviously disciplined in the data center. So I think that fundamental transition from infrastructure is key. Fundamental transition from data strategy, the fact that you will have your data in the cloud. That's the only place to get it, sorry. And from there, you can springboard forward into KPIs, into advanced analytics, into machine learning from that perspective. I could go on for hours, but I'm going to try and cut off there.
Yeah, we want to make sure we get through as much as possible, because there is a lot to talk about, especially getting so many different perspectives on the same kinds of ideas. So Mel, I think we're gonna follow up with you because you've kind of experienced diving into this. So if you maybe want to talk a bit about what your learning curve has been like jumping in, and what you're noticing as a newcomer.
I think for me, like, it's been a pretty steep learning curve, because I haven't been educationally, I haven't been immersed in the whole data management side of things. Educationally, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I did my master's in electronics, and I spent the early part of my career in business process improvement. Yeah, during the 80s. Oh my goodness, that seems like a long time ago. During the 80s, kind of early 90s. I was with GE when we were into Six Sigma, Lean Sigma, and continuous improvements. So I got to really understand the importance and the value of data, especially when conducting analysis in terms of our business processes, and then moved over to OLG to lead the business process improvement program. Where at the time IT was moving into COBIT and technology governance standards, and so I've seen so many changes. I still find the subject of data management sometimes esoteric. People think I'm a little bit geeky sometimes when I talk metadata management and master data management. And this is kind of lingo that I have to experience and to try and understand. So lots and lots of changes, and even more, I think, in the position that I'm in, data, whether it's data in the clouds or in systems or applications, moving towards more digital in terms of our products, our offerings, and our services. You can't escape it now, and I almost kind of feel that. It's the roles that we're in, it's one of continuous learning and continuous improvement. You can never really stand still, because the technology never stands still. So on top of my daily job, as I'm sure as most of you are aware, always trying to keep in touch with the best practices that are coming out there and trying to be on top of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is all a lot to chew on. I'm trying to figure out which direction we want to take this panel in, but there's so many different ones for everybody. So I guess to start with, actually, we do have a question, follow up from Deborah for Rob. We have some curiosity about, what does a data engineer do? No pressure to tie it back to all of the other questions, though.
It's so data engineering is the next generation after what we all knew as ETL developers. that were using more of the traditional tools. Data engineering is using the new set of tools and technologies, and it's more what they're now referring to data pipelining. It's not it's not just one tool that you're using. So traditionally, going back, I'm dating myself here a little bit, but if you go back, 10 years, well, it's happening today still, but traditionally 10 years plus, it was Informatica, it was Data Stage, Ab initio, SSIS were the tools, and those were the kind of the only tools that you had at your disposal, apart from, of course, doing your hand coding SQL, which wasn't ideal. That's now changed, and there's a plethora of tools that are available to you, and that data engineer has to know all those tools. And again, it's not just simple data in, data out. It's much more complex. And we do see a lot of people right now who are trying to cast themselves as data engineers, but when you look at their their resumes, they are ETL developers who are trying to catch the wave and kind of get work through that avenue. But really, it's like I said, it's learning. You have to know many tools. If you look at the old charts I used to have with all the tools and technologies that were in our industry, there was probably 10 tools in total. Throw in a few more for databases. Now that number is in the hundreds. So it's a much more complex, world.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer the question for you, Deborah?
Yeah, I think somewhat. It definitely answers the question somewhat for me, because now I'm really thinking about how do you prepare people to enter a workforce or how do you prepare to enter a workforce where you're expected to be able to take on whichever tool comes to you without having a standard to work with, right? So I guess that would be a question for Francine. What do you try to make sure that students walk away with prepared to use whatever tools they need to and learn them on the fly?
Okay, I started in old school before all these great new technologies emerged, and I think both Rob and excuse me, Mr.
There's Martin and Mel.
made a great point in talking about what it's like and the difference between the data and the engineering and all of these different paths that you can go on when it comes to data. I try to get my students to get the fundamental concepts, and I teach the foundation course again. So if they can grasp the foundation, they can expound on the more superficial levels based on having mastered that foundation. And it really can be difficult to impress that upon my students sometimes, because with the application analysts, for one thing, they're like, I'm teaching them about how the database is structured, the different types of databases, for example, and it's from the legacy level forward. And they're like, but I don't know anything about what a table is. And I never see that. I just see the application, on the level that they work on it. So they can tend to have a hard time grasping the foundation and those fundamentals. Now, at a certain point, there are some students who will hear, quote unquote, what I'm trying to say. And when they do so much better in class than the students who may not get it. So what I do is I have them mentor the other students and help them better understand it from their peers.
That's a good way to do it. Make sure that they're not only, able to grasp the fundamentals, get at the core concepts, but they're able to, work with people who are going to be their peers in the industry. They get the opportunity to reinforce the concepts for themselves by explaining it. I had a bit of a similar experience, and I find that works really well. I don't know. I think Mel would be also someone who could comment on similar experiences. particularly with respect to one of the questions that I sent you, Mel, was what advice would you give someone interested in getting into this space based on your own switch? And I think that might tie in with this, where you had trouble sort of getting into it, or where you maybe found a really good way to do it and would want to pass that on.
Yeah, I kind of got, it was interesting because I kind of got pushed into it because, one of my very good friends was in the data management space. And he said, I'd like you to work with me because, I'm trying to implement information governance. And I was like, really? Like, I'm a process dude. Why the heck would you need to get involved? And he threw the DEMBOK book at me. And I was like, yeah, you really want me to start here? And I just started kind of, just skimming through it, trying to understand it. Again, there were some lingo. The DEMBOK data management has its own language, just like, any other discipline. And once I kind of got through that, I very, very quickly realized that there were a lot of things that I had done in the past. So business process improvement, trying to understand what systems and applications those businesses need, trying to understand what data that these were things in the past, that was important to me to be successful in my role. Concepts like data quality. I was like, okay, so trying to improve processes. Okay, so quality is important there as well. So I literally just immersed myself in this subject. I picked up the DEMBOK book. I looked at the DCAM stuff that was being developed by, the EDRM Council. I went on YouTube and I basically kind of followed that path and found it really, really interesting. And I was very fortunate because, as I finished school and I started my career, Lean Six Sigma was a big thing. And it was relatively easy for me to understand with, us moving in a more digital environment, that data was going to be the kind of the next big thing. So, even though I'm no doctor like Francine, I was at least able to realize that, this is a new thing to really kind of get on top of and to participate in. And luckily I had another colleague who had a similar background for me, and she asked me, hey, I'd like to get into this. So the question is actually quite pertinent, Eden. And I asked her to do the same thing. I said, here's, links to DEMBOK, here's links to DCAM, go on some of the courses, because a lot of the things that you may think you don't know about, you've actually touched on and can build on from your previous work experience. So that's kind of like my advice, is to just immerse yourself in it, because this is really to me this is kind of like open ground where there's so many opportunities to get into.
Very true. There's just so much going on in this space that you can get into whatever niche you like, and it can be an entire career, right? I know Rob mentioned Tableau earlier. People make their whole careers now working with Tableau, and I'm sure people make their whole careers with different aspects of Azure as well. Yeah, I think this is a fertile ground for a lot of conversation about what people need to know when they're getting into the space. And I'm wondering, so this wasn't on the questions list, so Rob, I'm giving you a bit of a heads up to think about this while I ask Martin a question, but I am going to ask about transferable skills between sort of the old veterans of the industry or newcomers from different spaces getting into roles, and what is applicable. But Martin, I wanted to ask you what you spoke a bit about the sort of education program to bring people in, as well as sort of your own experiences. So I'm wondering, firstly, like one of the questions that I sent to you earlier was like, what is something that you'd wish you'd known before at the start of your career, and would it have changed anything? But I think that also ties into what challenges do you find newcomers that you see are most unprepared for, as someone who sort of knows the industry ins and outs? And I know those are two somewhat tenuously related questions, but I think you can make it work.
Yeah, we'll string it together. I mean, GTLP is kind of an internship program, so I really like that from an onboarding perspective. I think in terms of preparation, it addresses kind of the primary constraint or concern around typical onboarding of students, which is they're educated, but they're not exactly prepared for the discipline that they've signed up for. So they need a certain degree of hands-on training, whether that's a 3GL language that they need to learn, like Java or Python. Usually they know that, but or a 4GL tool. Maybe they haven't had that from school, and we need to certify them in that, train them in that, and get them up to speed. Some of them are prepared for that transition. Some of them really dig their heels in and say, no, I don't want to do this, or this is too much, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This isn't what I imagined this discipline was going to be about. And I think that's one of the things that I think is critical is reach out through your network, find out what people are doing, find out what the role is like, find out what kind of extra fulfillment or activities that you need to perform in that role. Don't just wait until you show up at the doorstep and then have that with the employer. And then in terms of the things that I wished that people had taught me or that I'd known, find a mentor. I wish I'd had a mentor earlier on in my career. It would have really helped the guidance earlier on. It's something that you find out later on in your career that there's only so much you can do by yourself. And there's only so much that the industry is going to do for you. You need to have that mentorship program in place for yourself. If you don't have it, then it's a really hard uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. As we're seeing in some of the comments, networking is definitely key.
Yeah, network is key.
More than anything else. Yeah. I'm going to give anyone else a chance to sort of add on to that, because I imagine a lot of you will have thoughts about that, particularly about the idea of mentorship, the way that people prepare or aren't prepared for what the industry has to offer, unexpected challenges, and also there was a term I was thinking of that's completely vanished from my brain. We were mentioning transferable skills earlier. So I don't know, Rob, if you find that there's a lot of people that come over from other industries in the process. And this also got me thinking about to sort of tack onto that as an addendum, not to be like the one speaking all the time, but I remember in school a lot of professors warn people, you can't be a unicorn is one of the terms in tech, and I know it applies elsewhere. Someone who can do everything, right? And as Martin says, right, you are part of a team. You can't do everything. So I guess this would be something that I think Rob and Francine could both speak to. Rob, in terms of, are companies looking for specialization, or are there some folks who are still looking for their unicorns? And are students feeling the pressure to become unicorns, or is that changing and evolving? And how is it someone can sort of shake off feeling the need to do that? So I guess, Rob, we can start with you since I already primed you.
Yeah, okay, so lots of questions there.
Yeah.
So first of all, employers have always and will always ask for the unicorn. It's really our job to as a trusted advisor to them to explain that that person that you're looking for doesn't really exist. That's why they're called a unicorn. And you're better off to really understand what are the top 2 or 3 things that you need this person to either bring to the table or do for you. So no, I don't think the students are feeling the pressure to be unicorns. Kind of a follow on the thought that Francine had earlier. I think that first of all, the young people coming up today through the universities and colleges are super smart, and they are. And what they're learning is they're not necessarily learning a technology. They're learning technologies, and they're learning to learn technologies, because what they're seeing, what's happening now, and it's at a faster pace than it was back when I got into the industry, 25, 30 years ago. The changes is so frenetic that they have to be able to switch technologies every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, depending on what they're doing. And if you're not able to learn that quickly and easily, then you're going to be left behind. Or as Martin said, some people kind of dig in their heels and they say, I don't want to change, I don't want to learn, or it's too difficult. They're the ones that are going to get stuck in a role that's eventually going to disappear. So yeah, so the kids are like I said, they're so smart and they're so good at learning technology. So they don't necessarily come in with saying, I'm going to become an X developer. They come in with a kind of a toolkit of tools that they've learned, skills they've learned, technologies they've learned. And then they kind of figure out, to Martin's point, is not until they start working that they kind of figure out where they really want to sit. Do you want to be someone, when we used the term back end, front end? So the back end individuals are working on the databases, they're working on data integration. People that are more on the front end, they're heavily involved with the users, they're doing dashboards, they're doing analysis. And someone might come in thinking they're one and discovering that actually they like the other. So again, they're going to have to transition. So it's a combination of having the foundation that Francine mentioned, and then getting the work experience that Martin mentioned that allows them to figure out where they're going to fit. But like I said, they're learning. The programs now are diverse, and they're not trying to kick you out of school as a Fortran developer. For those who know what Fortran is, you're going to learn all kinds of tools, and it's a young person's game because the pace is crazy. So I hope
Yeah.
that did answer your question. Is that what you're looking for?
I think so. I think that answered a lot of my questions, that, people are still looking for unicorns. If you're not careful, you will end up in the unenviable position of having to be a unicorn,
Well,
where you have to be on all the different teams, do all the different things.
No one goes into it to become no one goes in as a unicorn. You can't go into it as a unicorn. You can, over the course of your career, morph into a unicorn because you've done so many different things, but that takes you 5 to 10 years before you can really say I've touched the full spectrum of the system, right from the source system all the way through to the analytics and the dashboards and the reporting that I'm providing to my business. So it takes a long time. So yeah, if someone is asking you for a unicorn, what it usually means is they haven't really figured out themselves what they need.
That's a good point, right?
Yeah.
They haven't thought about, what do I actually need this role to do?
Right.
They're just like, get me someone who can do anything. We'll figure out later what you're actually
It's easy.
gonna do.
It's easy to ask for everything.
Yeah.
And and that's one of the most challenging parts of our role is to work with our clients and to help them to define what they really need. And when somebody asks for two, what I'll call disparate skill sets, like, I'll explain to them, someone who's got that isn't also going to have this, because they're very different technologies, or they're a different part of the spectrum. And you really can't ask for that because that person doesn't exist. So what is it you really want?
Yeah. Yeah. To follow up on that, now, Francine, I know I tapped you to go up next and be on the docket. And I think, Mel, I'm probably going to tap you after this to talk a bit about your entry, because you mentioned picking up the DMBOK. So we have some questions about the fact that the DMBOK has 10 knowledge areas. How do you get experience in all of these knowledge areas if you're new to a data management career? Or how do you get experience in all of those areas? And I guess to sort of build on the unicorn question, how much is it necessary to get experience in, or intimately immerse yourself in all of the areas of the DMBOK? And I guess, like, I'm thinking of the value of specialization. How do you enter into, and how do you prepare to learn for a field that is so wide and also so deep? So Francine, I'm gonna throw it over to you if you're okay with that.
I started teaching from the DMBOK maybe around 2010, and those 10 functions coincide with really department areas in a business. So you got data administration, data modeling, data analytics, or business intelligence, as it was when I first started. So, you know, I tutored a lot of people to get certified in the DMBOK for many years globally.
Mm-hmm.
And I found differences in cultural, I found cultural differences in some of my students. So what you really need to get is an understanding of the functions without mastering them, without becoming a specialist in those various functions. So now that we've advanced where the original DMBOK didn't include, I don't think, the cloud or data science. So now some of these newer technologies like have new splitting differences like artificial intelligence versus machine learning. And Rob, I read your great article end to end on that, and I gained a lot of you know, new understanding. And that also there is SAS that did a study in the annual data analytics global executive study, and it was on how trust delivers value. And what they stressed in their study was that many of their respondents found that they had greater access to the data, but many of them reported that they were not able to get the right data to answer their questions. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that it's essential to have the right data for learning when you're learning how to have the right data.
Yeah, no, that really resonates, as does the idea of understanding without mastery. You have to have the right data. It's got to be specific, and you'll experience very specific, you know, the need for very specific knowledge and very specific experience, but you don't have to be a master of everything.
Right. And I think that some people learning the new technologies were expecting too much, that for it to be so much more simple than it actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's good. That is a good point, right? Where we are, especially because we have to switch technologies so often. And I think there's a, to go back to a point you made earlier about the fundamentals, right? There is sort of that underlying structure of how to understand it all, but that does take a bit of conceptual learning to get to. Mm. Yeah. I'm just wondering, so Mel, I warned you I was going to throw it over to you, and now I am. Because you mentioned also learning from the DMBOK. So if you want to talk a bit about your experience relating to what Francine described as the finding the right data to answer your questions, how to get that understanding so you can start off without feeling like you have to do it all.
I actually started that way. Funnily enough, yeah, the OCD in me saw this wheel. I was going to get into this, and I was like, oh my goodness, I totally need to know all about all this. If I'm going into information governance, I need to be some kind of SME, subject matter expert in all of these areas. And I approached it with kind of great anxiety and trepidation. And I realized, as most of you guys have said, and you have scars to prove it, I'm sure that, you know, I didn't necessarily need to be an expert in all of these areas, you know, around DMBOK. You know, there were things that, you know, I just needed to get, I guess the equivalent will be a sampling, right? Like an understanding high level as to what, you know, high level, what these areas were. There were some very discrete issues, problems, opportunities we had from a data management perspective, which would allow me to do a drill down in some of the best practices and leverage some of these best practices. There were some things that, you know, were talked about in meetings that, you know, I had it's like that that scene in Friends with Joey when somebody throws a very complicated word, he's looking up and thinking, what the heck exactly does that mean? So I would have to go away, and I would have to go away and learn it and apply it. So I think certainly for me at least, I had to accept the fact that I wasn't going to be an expert in all of these areas. I had to relinquish the fact that I would have to approach this with, I guess, the utmost humility and go to people that knew better than I, and be comfortable about deferring to other people that knew better than I, and to work those relationships with those people who just had greater subject matter expertise with me, and leverage them as much as possible. And just to kind of echo a point that Rob had mentioned regarding unicorns, I recently had a new hire, and this individual, fantastic, excellent, people skills, but probably only knew 2 or 3 slices of the Dembok pie, and even then, wasn't necessarily an expert in that. But when I was looking at this individual, and I was taking this individual in terms of their knowledge and what they bring to the team, I found that it was okay if they weren't experts in the other slices of Dembok pie, because hey, you know what? I have somebody else in my team that's an expert in the Dembok pie, so they can work together and they can help each other along. So yeah, I think maybe through the scars and the pain and the stress, I looked like John Bon Jovi when I started this role. I think it's just a realization, right? That you just have to let go and just learn to work with others, and that's okay.
Yeah. Can I make a comment on that, Mal? So the person that you hired, so I think what you did was brilliant, because what we try to share with our clients is, when you're hiring somebody to your team full time, you're really hiring for 2 things. You're hiring for attitude, and you're hiring for aptitude. If they have those 2, then they're going to have the attitude, they want to learn, and they have the aptitude to learn. They're going to pick up those other things. Don't do a full-time or a permanent hire looking for technologies, because it will change over time. Your company will change over time, and that's not what you want. You want somebody who is going to fit with the team and who has the interest and desire and the aptitude to learn those other technologies, and over time they will. And that's also what you want to give your employee. You want to give them a stretch opportunity. They want to go somewhere where, if they step into the role and they fit perfectly from day one, where do they go from there? Next thing, they have to leave your team and go somewhere else because they want to learn. You want there to be stretch and growth opportunity within the team that they're joining. So obviously, what you did, Mel, was brilliant.
That's a really good point about growth within the team, growing the people on your team. And I know, like, obviously I haven't been around in the industry for a hugely long time, but I do know that whenever I talk about, trends within organizations, I hear a lot about, there's a lot more cross-department communication, cross-functional teams. There's a lot more emphasis on that now, is my understanding. And I'm wondering, on that vein, I think Martin might be the best position to speak to those changes within information and how that relates to the idea of, various subject matter expertises and the departments represented by the slices of the Dembok pie.
Well, especially when you get into, advanced analytics, cross-functional teams is paramount. You have to grow these cross-functional teams and work with them. It's no longer, before 10, 15 years ago, you could live in your technology domains or your little department silos and lob stuff over the fence. And it worked sometimes, and it didn't work. When it didn't work, you fixed it. It wasn't that big of a deal. But you get into these advanced analytics, you need to have subject matter experts that cover territories, broad territories. It's hard to amass one person. So you're looking at 2 or 3 people at least. And then from a technology domain, the way Rob and everyone else has said, that the stuff changes on a daily, weekly basis. You can't expect to have one person go to anymore. You need to have that cross team, cross-functional team. So you'll have multiple participants. So we'll have people from, different directors, different vice presidents, all participating in one delivery. It's not just as simple as it used to be. And yeah, the cultural fit, I think, is paramount. Yes, it's important to have a degree of fit into the domain. It's really hard to take a data scientist and turn them into a data engineer and vice versa, for example. So you need to know whether you're, an A, a B, or a C. But once you're a B, stick with a B, right? And when you're planning and managing, by the way, expect to hire and deal with multiple Bs, not just one. There'll be so many to deal with. The other thing is collaboration. We're working together in sprint. It's agile. It's no longer the great planning sessions and diagrams and models. Yes, there are some models, but they're not as elaborate as they used to be. The plans aren't as complicated as they used to be. We talk about sprints, we talk about quarterly releases, and we align behind those two and align the messaging up and across. And that seems to be far more effective than it did before. The planning cycles before were terrible, absolutely horrid. I remember doing them and just shaking my head and saying, why am I doing this? But I mean, it was paperwork and it had to get done, but it really didn't produce any throughput. So I think that's been, to me, the biggest change is the agile, the agility, moving into cloud, and the open source. The veracity of open source technology that's available now is astounding. I mean, it used to be, I mean, when I was evaluating NoSQL databases, I wound up going through 48 databases at the time. I mean, before it was like 5. We had 5 to pick from. 48. Like, think about that.
My God. Yeah. That is, oof, getting a little overwhelmed just thinking about going through all of that. Now, I am mindful of the time. We still got about 10 minutes left, maybe a bit more, depending on how engaged we get to the end. So I do want to do kind of a rapid fire, not quite on topic, but if you have something to add to a previous answer, absolutely feel free to. And so I did want to talk about challenges, either in your particular workplace or in terms of situations that are happening globally but haven't been mentioned yet. But not on that note, I am going to start with Mel, because you mentioned building your data strategy and now working on implementation. So I wanted to ask about the biggest challenge or biggest challenges you faced implementing this information governance at OLG.
Definitely cultural. Like I kind of go back during my early days as when I was in Six Sigma, and I used to focus on equations and things like that and new tools. And my mentor there said to me, you know what, because why are you spending so much time on this? Do you realize that in the work that you do, 70% of it is cultural and how you work with people and how you can show value to what you're doing so it benefits them. And I kind of took that like with me, I think, throughout my career. And when you're engaging with the business, they don't talk things like metadata. I mean, they know these things intuitively. They know the value of quality intuitively. But I think if you're unable to kind of connect the dots between how the things that you do from a data management, a data governance perspective, if you can't connect the dots with how that delivers business value to them, you're not going to get much traction. So when we actually created our data management strategy, we actually had a two-pronged approach. One was, just like interviewing our data owners, interviewing our data stewards, understanding what their challenges are on a daily from a data management perspective. At that time as well, we had a new CEO come on board, so we were undergoing a refresh of our strategy at OLG. So literally as that was happening and we were having interviews, just kind of connecting the dots, as to how some of their pain points and their opportunities align with where we're trying to go with an organization, and identifying very specific, discrete, I guess I call it small packets, to Martin's point, trying to be a little bit more agile, trying to just deliver small packets of data management type initiatives that we could turn around relatively quickly and show value. I think that was one of the things, or one of the approaches that we took to get traction and get approval on our DMS.
That's interesting. Yeah, that does really fit with the idea of the agile implementation, implementing things in bite-sized chunks, making sure that you have something that you can change before you start trying to implement it. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think on that vein, I'm wondering, Martin, before I ask Francine and Rob about the elephant on the Zoom call, about how COVID has impacted what you do and how you think it's going to affect the way that people engage in the future with education, with recruiting, as well as with opportunities. I'm wondering, Martin, what are some of the challenges that you face in, or have faced in the past, in adapting to new trends or new ways of doing things in the data and information space, like cloud or like whatever is going to be next?
Well, the next thing is tough. I mean, there's always a next generation of something. I think the challenge there is kind of separating the message out from the vendor hype, right? So there is a lot of hysteria and hype out there. Some of that is legitimate, some of it is not. Separating it out is a real challenge. I like leveraging things like Gartner for that. Their hype cycle let us all know, basically, from a credibility perspective, where things are really at from multiple perspectives, right? It's not just us singularly reaching this conclusion. It's basically, again, that network, that community that's reached that consensus together. I would say I can't emphasize enough about the change management. My goodness, the level of change management that you have to undertake when you're going into governance, metadata, data quality, data warehousing, business intelligence, advanced analytics is enormous. And you have to do it religiously, constantly. And it has to be a discipline. It has to be something that you undertake, not just add on. It's not an adjunct. And I'd say from the growing pains that we've had, I've had good experiences, by the way, with our students, our GTLP, Graduate Training Leadership Program, I believe that's what it is. They've been excellent. I think our biggest challenge has been, like everyone else with recruiting, there's just so much demand right now in the pipeline that, they used to have 5 or 10 postings, now they have 500 to deal with. So it's a lot. It's a lot of churn. And there's a lot of good people out there. Identifying them can be tough. And like I said, is that alignment between discipline, domain, faculty, education, and some technology can be a challenge. So
Yeah.
we work on that every day, basically. So
yeah, it is an ongoing process. I think there's never going to be a
continual
time when we're
improvement.
done. Yeah.
No, it's never done.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
put to bed.
Yeah. I think to end us off, between Rob and Francine, I'll let you two figure out who's going to go first. But I've got sort of a similar question for both of you, because COVID-19 has had a huge impact between lockdowns and distancing and offices closing down and schools going completely remote. So we know COVID-19 has had an impact on the job market. From Rob's perspective, I'm really interested in what the impact has been like, as well as in this new situation, how do people find opportunities? How do people, what kind of resources people can use for that? And then Francine, it's going to be sort of a similar question, because I know it's had a huge impact on education, and it is going to have a huge impact on what people need to know, because for going forward, because workplaces have been adapting to it. So I think, Rob, you were prepared for this question the whole time. Yeah. So
yeah. So COVID, obviously, I mean, it's had a massive impact. I take COVID, this COVID period we've been through, and it breaks up into 3 very distinct phases. We had March until November, where nothing happened. People were waiting to see how it was going to play out. It was just keep the lights on. People that were on contract were hoping to just get to the end of their contract. Some people were being terminated early. Other contracts that were coming due were not being extended. And unfortunately, there was employees who were being let go, laid off because of COVID. So in that period, you had people coming into the marketplace with no work. No one was hiring. Then it all changed, and it just went through the roof starting in December, because 3 things happened. Number 1, employers discovered that work from home works. Number 2, they had a huge backlog of work that they hadn't addressed, new projects that they needed to do. And most importantly, vaccines were coming online. So all of a sudden they said, okay, we have to hire. And they went out to the marketplace and they started hiring like crazy. And you had all the people, there was a lot of supply, because there was people on the market who weren't able to find work. If they had come off of work prior to COVID, they were still on the market. And the marketplace just sucked all those people up very quickly. And then when they got jobs, they took them. Then that changed again for the third phase, and we started, I'm going to say, May, June timeframe, and it went from a a buyer's market to a seller's market. And now what was happening is the surplus was out of the marketplace. There was no people to hire. And on top of that, the people that were working were getting opportunities that were outside their jurisdiction. So I'm in Toronto, Ontario. If you need to work in the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, you live there, you have to work in that area because you have to come to work. All of a sudden, people are getting jobs in Texas, Victoria, BC, Halifax, New Brunswick. And so these people were getting, the employers were looking in the same job market, but these people were getting opportunities across the globe. As long as you were with one time zone plus or minus, it was working for them. So then what happened was the employers, and we still today have a very, very difficult time finding people. Everybody is struggling to find people because there just aren't enough people out there. And what that's done is it's driven incomes way up. People are getting, anywhere from 25 to 75% increases in their salaries, because what's happened is employers will have somebody making $100,000 a year, and they get a job offer somewhere else making 150, and their employer says, well, I can't match that. You're going to put my pay scales out of whack. I'm going to have to say, thank you, but no thank you. I can't counter, and off they go. Then what happens is they go to the marketplace thinking they're going to hire someone at 110 or 120, and they're now paying 150 or 160 for the person that they had a month ago. And so it's just driven the market, and the market has gone crazy. And the only correction I see that's going to happen with that is eventually COVID will get further and further behind us. We'll get our booster shots. Companies are going to start asking, I'm seeing this now, they're already talking about hybrid models. So work from home 100% isn't going to be the norm. It's going to be, we're never going to go back to all in the office, but we're not going to have the COVID 100% remote anymore. We're going to have hybrids, which means that they do need to see you once a week, twice a week, once a month, whatever it is. But you can't do that if you're in Toronto and your employer is in Victoria, BC. So now all of a sudden they're saying, I need you. You can live outside that zone where coming in once or twice a week is a big commute, but it's only once or twice a week. So that's going to change things. And I think that's going to bring things back down to a level of normalcy that we're just not seeing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does sound like it's kind of a wild, wild west out there, but
it's a wild, wild west. Very well put.
Yeah, but there's definitely, it does sound like there's lots of places to find opportunities, either through networking, through just regular job boards, through company websites. There's going to be something right now.
People are being inundated. The question of where are people finding jobs? Usually, the number one answer typically is, and the best one is networking through colleagues, friends, whatever. The new one that's come on the market now is just answer your phone or answer your email, because people are getting multiple offers. And I'll go to my clients, and if they can't make a decision quickly, and I warn them about that, you've got a week to make a hire. And if you take longer than a week, which people think is insanely fast, I've got clients that will do it in 2 days, 1 day, because they know if they don't do that in 5 days, that person, when they come back and say, I want to make the offer, it's like, well, they're off the market. They've taken a job somewhere else.
Yeah, truly a Wild West.
Yeah.
So I think, Francine, are you good to end us off to talk a bit about the impact COVID has had on education? And I know we've talked a lot about collaboration specifically, and I know it's a lot harder to collaborate the way we did before. I don't know, that may not be what you plan to talk about, since I gave you some time to think about it, but that was sort of my first thought. Is always collaboration's a lot harder, or different, at least virtually.
Well, actually, I'm affiliated with 3 different universities, and SNU is one of the top universities for distance learning. That's what my doctorate is in, distance learning and technology. The other two are a hybrid, face-to-face primarily. And I found out that SNU is both distance learning and brick and mortar, although they're primarily distance. And when COVID came along, they rapidly came up with a plan that worked really great. They took everybody out of the buildings and the entire university worked from home. And it went smoothly because of their model for distance learning. So we gave all students who had problems with the pandemic, we gave them extensions and made sure that everyone that wanted to keep trying passed. As far as the other two universities with face-to-face, I saw them struggling more and they were more challenged because they didn't want to go full distance learning, and they wanted to get back in the building as soon as possible. And that was their challenge. They had delays, they had to shut down and reopen. So I think it's a matter of how well prepared the universities were. And then SNU, we all worked together to make it happen, and it did happen. So that went extremely well.
Yeah, I think it sounds like the real key to succeeding in this distance virtual environment is to just prepare for it, plan for it, and not change your plans at the last minute, to know that that's what you're going to do and then do it.
Yes, I think that's a good model, a good way of putting it. Yes.
Yeah, as well as having great colleagues that you can collaborate with.
Now, if I may take a moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
To plug for competency-based education in the schools. And when in the 44th administration, United States fell to ranking 27th among all of the countries in the world, and we were lower than some third world countries. So competency-based education became the buzzword in academia as an alternative to a 3-credit seating and credit hours and a degree for a certain number of credits. Paula Blanc, the president at Southern New Hampshire University, was chosen by the White House to lead that pilot. And so that's the new trend across America, especially, is competency-based education and working with companies and getting certifications from AWS, SAS, Microsoft. Google has its own program. And just wanted to.
Yeah. That's a really good plug, because that's sort of like that we could launch into a whole other question about professional development, certifications, and licensing around specific qualifications. But we have unfortunately run out of time with still so many questions that I want to ask all of you. So I will, instead of asking more questions, take the time to thank you so much for joining me today. This was fantastic. I know I learned a lot. I think everyone watching learned a lot, and I think we all had a great time. So hopefully, to answer the rest of your questions, either we'll be able to have you back, or we'll just be able to ask you directly. But thank you for taking the time to do this. It has been wonderful, and thank you to everyone who joined us to watch today and asked questions in the chat. It was fantastic. I think on the note of competency-based training, I will just plug once more the CDMP course that Deborah is running with IRMAC, as well as the concept of competency-based education, because I think that adds a lot of value in terms of getting the skills that you need, rather than just spending time and not necessarily having the skills you need. And I'm sure you've done a lot of research about that as well, if folks are more interested, so we can make sure to include that if you'd be interested in that. But yeah, thank you everyone who came out. I'm gonna wrap up. I'm babbling a little because I'm very aware of the time, but it has been fantastic.